My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 68 years old. And on my birthday, my only son told me I was worthless and threw me out onto the street. Before I tell you about what I found in that dusty old garage, he left me a secret that would change everything. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The lawyer's office smelled of old paper and stale coffee. 3 weeks after my husband Richard's funeral, the grief was still a raw, open wound in my chest. I sat stiffly in a leather chair that felt too big for me, my son Michael beside me. He placed a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was supposed to look comforting, but his fingers were tense, impatient. Mr. Davison, our lawyer for 30 years, cleared his throat and looked down at the document on his mahogany desk. The last will and testament of Richard A. Vance. The words echoed in the silent room. My heart ached. This official piece of paper felt like a final cold goodbye. To my son Michael Vance, the lawyer read, his voice monotone, I bequeath our primary residence, the Penthouse apartment on Gold Coast, Chicago, along with the primary investment portfolio. I saw it then. A flicker in Michael's eyes. He squeezed my shoulder, a little too hard this time, and I saw his wife Jessica, who was sitting on his other side, give his arm a subtle, triumphant squeeze. A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my veins. Mr. Davison continued, almost as an afterthought. And to my beloved wife Eleanor Vance, I bequeath the property located at 45 Industrial Drive, Southside. The garage and its contents. The garage. The words hung in the air. A garage. 45 years of marriage, of building a life, of raising a child, of holding my husband's hand as he took his last breath. And I was left a dusty, forgotten garage in the industrial district. The investment portfolio I thought we shared, the home filled with our memories, it all went to Michael. The drive back to the penthouse was a blur. Michael chattered on about his plans, something about bringing in designers, modernizing the space. I just stared out the window, the city lights smearing into meaningless streaks of color. When we stepped inside, the home I had shared with Richard for 2 decades already felt alien. Cold. Michael set my small suitcase down by the door. Not in the bedroom. By the front door. I think it would be best if you found somewhere else to stay, Mom, he said. His voice wasn't cruel, not yet. It was worse. It was businesslike. I stared at him, the words not making sense. What do you mean, Michael? This is my home. The penthouse is mine now, he said, gesturing vaguely around the room. It's in the will. Jessica and I have plans and we need to start right away. I'm having some colleagues over tomorrow to discuss turning Dad's study into my home office. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. But where am I supposed to go? Tonight. He shrugged, a dismissive gesture that shattered the last piece of my heart. You could stay with your sister for a while. Or, there's always that garage Dad left you. He let out a short, sharp laugh and Jessica joined in, a high-pitched sound that grated on my raw nerves. That's when he leaned in, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that I will hear in my nightmares for the rest of my life. You're just a useless old woman, Mom. What would you even do with a real inheritance? Dad knew that. A punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. Useless. After all the years I'd sacrificed, the dinners I'd cooked, the school events I'd attended, the support I'd given both him and his father. Useless. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I was too stunned, too broken. I simply picked up my suitcase, my purse, and the single rusty key that Mr. Davison had given me. I walked out of my home, my life, and didn't look back. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city's indifferent glow a stark contrast to the darkness that had consumed me. Eventually, I found myself on an unfamiliar street in the industrial district, the air thick with the smell of diesel and decay. And there it was. Number 45. A dilapidated brick building with a single massive garage door, boarded-up windows, and a heavy padlock that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. This was it. This was my inheritance. My legacy. A tomb for a life already lived. My hand shook so badly I could barely hold the key. It was my birthday after all. 68 years old, homeless and utterly alone. With a deep breath that felt like swallowing broken glass, I stepped out of the car. The key was cold, a piece of jagged metal against my palm. I walked to the heavy, groaning door, the rusted padlock looking like a final insult. I jammed the key into the lock. It resisted, metal grinding against metal in the suffocating silence. Then, with a loud jarring click, it gave way. My heart hammered against my ribs. I put my shoulder against the cold, corrugated metal and pushed. The ancient door groaned in protest, inch by agonizing inch. The beam from my little flashlight cut a trembling path through decades of darkness. The air was thick with the scent of motor oil, cold concrete, and forgotten things. For a moment I just stood there in the gaping doorway. The cold Chicago wind at my back, my son's cruel words a fresh wound in my soul. This was it. The grand prize of my 45-year marriage. A place to lay my head on my 68th birthday. I took a hesitant step inside, my worn-out shoes scuffing against the gritty floor. My flashlight beam danced over dusty workbenches, empty shelves and cobwebs as thick as cotton candy. It was exactly as I'd pictured it. Worthless. Just like me. But then the light caught something. Something large. Something covered. In the center of the vast space, there were 3 hulking shapes, each shrouded in a custom-fitted gray cloth cover. They were arranged with a strange precision, a meticulous care that seemed completely out of place in this derelict building. My breath hitched. What was this? I walked forward, my curiosity a flicker of warmth against the cold dread. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the first cover. The material was soft, thick, and expensive feeling under my fingertips. It wasn't a cheap plastic tarp. This was something special. With a deep breath, I gripped the edge of the cover. I pulled. The cloth slid away with a soft whisper, revealing what lay beneath. And I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and the flashlight nearly slipped from my numb fingers. It couldn't be. Gleaming under the weak beam of light, as if it had just rolled off a showroom floor, was a car. But not just any car. It was a 1959 Cadillac Eldorado Biarritz. In a shade of dazzling pristine pink that I recognized instantly. It was the exact car Richard and I had dreamed of owning when we were just kids, parked by the lake on our first real date, planning a future that felt as bright and shiny as the chrome on that beautiful machine. Richard, I whispered, my voice a broken croak in the cavernous silence. What on earth did you do? My husband had never been a car guy. He drove a sensible Buick. He complained about gas prices. In all our years together, he'd never once mentioned a passion for collecting anything, let alone something like this. My mind was reeling, trying to make sense of the impossible reality in front of me. This wasn't just a car. It was a museum piece. A flawless, gleaming ghost from our past. My heart was pounding in my chest. If this was what was under the first cover, what on earth could Richard have hidden under the other 2? I moved to the next shape, my legs feeling unsteady. I pulled away its cover with a newfound urgency. A 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray emerged, its split rear window and fiery red paint catching the light like a trapped flame. It was immaculate. Perfect. Beside it, a plaque on a small stand read its history. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. The third cover. I barely had to pull. It seemed to fall away on its own. A 1965 Ford Mustang Shelby GT350, brilliant in its white and blue racing stripes. Another legend. Another impossible treasure sitting in this forgotten corner of Chicago. 3 of them. 3 perfect, priceless pieces of automotive history. Worth? I couldn't even begin to guess. My brain refused to process the numbers. Millions. It had to be millions. There has to be an explanation, I murmured, my own voice sounding strange and distant. I swept the flashlight beam around the garage again, looking for anything, any clue. That's when I saw it. Taped to the wall next to a grime-covered light switch was a simple white business envelope. My name was written on it in Richard's familiar, elegant script. I stumbled toward it, my hand reaching out. This was it. The answer. I pulled it from the wall, my fingers fumbling with the seal. The paper felt thick, important. Inside were several pages of his distinctive stationery. With fingers that wouldn't stop shaking, I tore open the envelope. The words I was about to read would not only explain the secret collection of cars, but would change the entire reality of my life. I found the light switch next to where the envelope had been taped. With a flick, the garage was flooded with bright, clean light from modern fixtures recessed into the ceiling. The sudden illumination revealed the truth. This wasn't some abandoned dump. The floor was polished concrete, the walls were insulated, and along one side was a climate control system humming quietly. It was a sanctuary, a vault disguised as a ruin. I sank onto a leather bench I hadn't noticed before, the letter heavy in my hands. My dearest Eleanor, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. I am so sorry for the shock and the pain you must be feeling right now. And I'm sorry for the secrets. The secrecy was never meant to hurt you, my love, but to protect you. I had to pause, my vision blurring with tears. Protect me? From what? 6 years ago, the letter continued. The doctors told me about my heart. They gave me 5 years at best. I beat them by a year, but I knew my time was limited. I knew I had to make a plan to ensure you would be safe and secure after I was gone. My hand flew to my mouth. His diagnosis of progressive heart failure. He had always downplayed it, insisting he felt fine, that he had plenty of time. I had no idea he'd been living with a death sentence, planning for the end while I remained blissfully ignorant. I know you're wondering about the will. About Michael. About why I would leave our home to him and this garage to you. Believe me, Eleanor, this decision caused me more sleepless nights than my heart ever did. But over the last decade, I've watched our son change. The ambitious boy we raised has become something else. Something harder. More calculating. I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks I'm not paying attention. The way Jessica encourages his worst impulses. The dismissal in his voice. A sob escaped me. I hadn't realized Richard had seen it all so clearly. I'd always made excuses for Michael, telling myself he was just stressed from work, that Jessica was just a bit materialistic. The truth is, Richard wrote, I was terrified of what would happen if I left our assets to you and him jointly. Michael would have found a way to control everything. He would have managed your portion for you, bleeding it dry for his own ventures while convincing you it was for your own good. So, I created this split inheritance. I gave him what he values most, the visible status symbols. The penthouse, the portfolio he knew about. The things he could boast about to his friends. But what you are looking at now, my love, is the real wealth. The real inheritance. I looked up at the 3 gleaming cars, their polished surfaces reflecting the bright lights. These 3 cars alone are worth a small fortune. Their documentation is in the office. But they are just the beginning. I needed a way to build this nest egg for you without Michael ever finding out. You remember that small investment portfolio I inherited from my father years ago? The one you always called my hobby money? I never touched it for our daily lives. For the last 6 years, I've been pouring every bit of my energy and skill into growing it, quietly acquiring assets in a separate trust that would transfer to you, and only you upon my death. It was my secret project. My final gift. The hobby money. I remembered. It was a modest inheritance Richard had received before we were even married. I never paid it any mind. It was his. To think all this time. In the safe behind the photograph of us in Venice, the combination is our anniversary, of course. You'll find everything. Deeds to several income-producing properties across the city. Banking information for accounts that will provide you with a comfortable income for the rest of your days. And the deed to a small cottage on Lake Geneva. I bought it 4 years ago. It's all furnished, waiting for you. It's the home I always dreamed we'd retire to. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the letter down. A safe. A cottage. I scanned the garage and saw it. A small finished door I hadn't noticed. I pushed it open and found a small, perfect office. And on the wall, the framed photo of us on the Rialto Bridge, laughing, young and so in love. I stumbled to the photo, my fingers tracing Richard's smiling face. Behind it, I felt the cool, hard outline of the safe. My hands trembled as I entered our anniversary date. 0-6-1-8. A soft click and the door swung open. Inside was a thick leather portfolio. The top document was titled, Complete Asset Inventory for Eleanor Vance. I flipped it open. Columns of numbers, property addresses, stock certificates. The total value at the bottom of the final page made my ears ring. It was a staggering number. A number that meant I would never have to worry about anything ever again. I sank into the office chair, clutching the portfolio to my chest. Richard had orchestrated all of this in secret. He had played the part of the doting, conventional husband while building an empire for me, a fortress to protect me from our own son. I looked up from the letter, tears streaming down my face, staring at the automotive treasures before me. Richard had given me more than wealth. He had given me independence. But what I didn't know was that my son Michael, Was about to make my first steps into that new life a living nightmare. After the initial shock wore off, a strange calm settled over me. I spent that first night on a comfortable sofa in Richard's secret office, the hum of the climate control a soothing lullaby. The office, I discovered, had a compact bathroom with a shower, a mini fridge stocked with bottled water, and even a small closet with a few new outfits in my size. My practical, thoughtful husband had anticipated everything. In the morning, the reality of my situation hit me. I was a multimillionaire, but I didn't have a toothbrush. I didn't have a change of clothes besides the ones Richard had bought. I didn't have any food. Before I could begin to unravel the complexities of Richard's estate, I needed the simple necessities of life. I remembered the joint checking account Richard and I had shared for over 40 years. It always had a healthy balance for daily expenses. Michael wouldn't have known about it. It wasn't part of the main investment portfolio mentioned in the will. It would be more than enough to tide me over until I could meet with the lawyer Richard had named in his letter, Arthur Sterling. Feeling a sliver of control for the first time in days, I drove my old reliable Toyota to a nearby grocery store. I walked the aisles, the bright lights and cheerful music a jarring contrast to the turmoil in my heart. I picked out a new toothbrush, shampoo, some simple food, yogurt, bread, a block of cheese. It felt strange buying these small things when I knew I could probably buy the entire store, but it was grounding. Normal. I wheeled my modest cart to the checkout lane. The cashier, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled as she scanned my items. "That'll be $42.50, she said. I pulled out the debit card for our joint account, the familiar piece of plastic I'd used 1,000 times before. I inserted it into the machine. Beep beep beep. Card declined. The screen flashed in harsh red letters. A hot flush crawled up my neck. That couldn't be right. "Could you try it again, please?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There must be a mistake." She swiped it this time. The result was the same. "I'm sorry, ma'am. It's not going through. Do you have another form of payment?" My face was burning. I fumbled in my purse. I had about $20 in cash. Not enough. The people in line behind me were starting to shift impatiently. My heart hammered in my chest. Humiliation, hot and sharp, pricked at my eyes. I'm sorry," I stammered, my hands trembling. I have to leave these." I turned to push my cart away, my eyes fixed on the floor, wanting the ground to swallow me whole. It was one thing for my son to throw me out of my home. It was another thing, a new level of petty cruelty, to leave me stranded without even enough money for a carton of milk. "Excuse me, ma'am." A gentle voice cut through my shame. I looked up to see a woman in her 70s, with kind, intelligent eyes and silver hair styled elegantly. She was standing beside my cart. "Allow me," she said softly, and before I could protest, she had handed her own credit card to the cashier. "I'll take care of this." "Oh no, I couldn't possibly," I began, but she held up a hand. "Please. It would be my pleasure." Her smile was warm and genuine. The cashier processed the payment, and the woman handed me the bags. I don't know how to thank you," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I can pay you back, if you'll give me your name and address." "There's no need for that," she said. "Let's just say it's from a friend of Richard's." I stared at her, stunned. "You knew my husband?" She nodded, her eyes full of a sympathy that felt deep and real. "My name is Margaret Peterson. Richard and I became acquainted over the last few years. He spoke of you often, Eleanor. With great love." It turned out Margaret owned a small art gallery in Lake Geneva, and had a second home not far from Chicago. Richard had met her while making preparations at the cottage, and they had struck up a friendship. He had even shown her my picture. We stepped outside and she placed a gentle hand on my arm. "He was a good man. He was worried, you know. Worried about things." She didn't need to say more. We exchanged phone numbers, and she made me promise to call her once I was settled. As she walked away, I stood on the sidewalk, clutching my groceries, a mix of profound shame and overwhelming gratitude washing over me. Michael had tried to strip me of my dignity, to leave me completely destitute. He had closed the account, knowing it was my only immediate access to funds. He hadn't just disowned me. He had tried to erase me. Margaret's kindness was a beacon in my darkest hour, but it also lit a fire within me. Michael had tried to humiliate me, to leave me with nothing. It was time to go to the penthouse one last time, not as a victim, but to reclaim the pieces of my past before starting my future. The next morning, I dressed in one of the new, simple pantsuits Richard had left for me in the garage office. Fit perfectly. Looking at myself in the small bathroom mirror, I saw not a victim, but a woman who had been underestimated. I called Michael. "I need to come by and pick up the rest of my personal things," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "Fine," he clipped, irritation evident in his tone. "Be here by 10. The designers are coming at 11, and they need the space cleared out. And don't take your time." When I arrived at the penthouse, the transformation was already jarring. The doorman, who had known me for years, looked at me with pity in his eyes. Upstairs, the front door was ajar. Music was blaring from somewhere inside. I walked into what had been my home for 2 decades and my heart sank. Our family photos, the ones that had lined the hallway chronicling Michael's life from a happy baby to a successful man, were gone. Ghostly rectangles on the wallpaper were all that remained. Several pieces of art Richard and I had collected on our travels had been taken down, leaning carelessly against a wall. Michael emerged from his father's study, a phone pressed to his ear. He gestured impatiently at a stack of cardboard boxes in the middle of the living room. "Your stuff," he mouthed, before turning away to continue his conversation. No greeting. No apology. Just dismissal. I walked over to the boxes. Jessica had clearly packed them. My treasured books were thrown in with old shoes. A delicate porcelain music box my mother had given me was unwrapped, rattling dangerously against a stack of photo albums. I felt a surge of hot anger. This wasn't just carelessness, it was contempt. Methodically, I began to sort through the mess, carefully rewrapping my fragile items in sweaters and scarves. I would not let them destroy these last tangible pieces of my life. As I worked, I could overhear snippets of Michael's conversation. "Yeah, complete gut renovation, maximize the resale value. Flip it in a year, maybe 18 months. Dad's taste was so dated." Each word was a small, sharp jab. This home, the place Richard had loved, where we had shared so many quiet evenings, was just a line item on a spreadsheet to him. An asset to be flipped. When he finally got off the phone, he strode back into the room. "Are you done yet?" "Honestly, Mom, it's just stuff. You don't even have a place to put it all." I looked up at him, then really looked at him. He was handsome, just like his father, but a coldness had settled in his features, a hardness around his eyes that had never been there in Richard's. "I have a place," I said quietly, "and I will take as much time as I need. These aren't just things, Michael. They are memories." He rolled his eyes, a gesture of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Fine. Whatever. I have to take another call." He disappeared back into the study. As I continued packing, a strange sense of detachment washed over me. I was grieving not just for Richard but for the son I had lost. The loving boy who brought me hand-picked flowers was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating stranger. Richard had seen it. He had seen it long before I was willing to admit it to myself. I taped up the last box of my most precious belongings and went to find Michael. The study was half empty. Richard's beautiful mahogany desk, a family heirloom, was gone. In its place stood a sleek, sterile slab of glass and chrome. "I'm finished," I announced from the doorway. He looked up from his laptop. "Great. The doorman can help you with the boxes." He stood up, ready to escort me out, his duty done. "Before I go," I said, my voice finding a strength I didn't know it possessed, "I want to say a proper goodbye to the place." Something flickered in his eyes, irritation, maybe a flash of guilt, but he nodded. "Sure. Just lock up when you leave." He brushed past me without another word. Left alone, I walked through the emptying rooms. I ran my hand along the wallpaper in our bedroom, opened the closet one last time. Most of Richard's clothes were gone, but at the very back, pushed into a corner, was his old leather messenger bag. I pulled it out. It was unexpectedly heavy. Unzipping it, I found a sealed manila envelope inside. My name was written on it. My clever, thorough husband. A backup for his backup. I clutched it to my chest, a final secret gift from this place of memories. Downstairs, after the doorman had loaded my boxes into my car, I took one last look at the building. I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt liberated. That penthouse was no longer my home. It was just a property. A deal. My real home was waiting for me, a place I had yet to see. A future Richard had carefully, lovingly built for me from the shadows. And now it was time to go claim it. The drive out of Chicago felt like an escape. With each mile that passed, the city's gray, imposing skyline shrank in my rearview mirror, and the weight on my shoulders seemed to lift. I was heading north towards Wisconsin, towards a place called Lake Geneva, towards a home I'd never seen but already felt a deep connection to. I followed the GPS directions through charming, tree-lined streets until it announced, "You have arrived." I pulled up to a modest stone cottage, nestled behind a row of mature cypress trees that offered a sense of privacy and seclusion. It wasn't grand or ostentatious like the penthouse. It was perfect. A natural wood gate opened onto a stone path that meandered through a small but beautifully kept garden, filled with my favorite flowers, hydrangeas, roses, and lavender. Richard. He had remembered. Using the key from the document packet, I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside. And I stopped breathing. It was as if he had reached into my mind and built my dream home. The living room had hardwood floors covered with soft, patterned rugs. A stone fireplace was flanked by built-in bookshelves, already filled with titles I loved. The furniture was comfortable and classic, in shades of blue and cream, my favorite colors. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I walked through the house in a daze. The kitchen was modern but cozy, with a small breakfast nook that overlooked the garden. The master bedroom was spacious but intimate, with French doors that opened onto a private patio. From there, I could just see a sliver of the lake glittering between the trees. But it was the small study off the living room that finally broke me. On the wall above a simple writing desk hung a painting, a watercolor of the Venice canals, where Richard had proposed to me 46 years ago. We had bought it from a street artist that day, but the original had been lost in a move decades ago. I thought it was gone forever. But here it was. Perfect replica. He had commissioned it from memory. The tears came then. Not the hot, angry tears of betrayal, but quiet, grateful tears of profound love. I sank into a window seat, the cushion a familiar shade of cornflower blue, and I wept for the man I had loved and for the man I was only now, after his death, truly getting to know. A soft knock at the door startled me. I wiped my eyes and went to open it. Standing on my doorstep was Margaret Peterson, the kind woman from the grocery store. She was holding a covered casserole dish. "Hello, Eleanor," she said with a warm smile. "I saw your car. Richard made me promise I'd check in on you when you finally arrived. I thought you might not feel like cooking your first night." I was stunned. He told you about this place?" "Oh yes," she said, stepping inside as I held the door open. "He came up several times a year for the past few years, preparing it. He called it his Eleanor project. He was so meticulous. He brought photos of your city apartment, trying to get every detail just right for you." Over tea in the cozy kitchen, Margaret filled in the gaps. She told me how Richard had befriended people in the small community, how he'd hired a local gardener and housekeeper to maintain the property, how he'd told her that when I arrived, I might be feeling a bit lost and could use a friend. He hadn't just built me a house, he had woven me into the fabric of a community. That night I slept more soundly than I had in years, lulled by the distant, gentle sound of waves on the shore. The next morning I explored my new home. In the desk I found a folder with all the practical information I would need: local doctors, utility contacts, even a paid-up membership to the local library. Tucked inside was another handwritten note from Richard. "My dearest Susan," it read, using his old pet name for me. "If you're reading this, you've found your way home. My only hope is that this place offers you a fresh start, free from obligations or expectations that don't serve your happiness. Live well, my love. Live freely." Over the next few days I did just that. I walked along the beach in the mornings. I met some of the neighbors Margaret introduced me to. I read books by the fireplace in the evenings. The cottage began to feel less like a gift from Richard and more like mine. On the fourth day my phone rang. It was Michael. "Mom, where are you?" His voice was sharp, impatient. "I've been calling your friends. No one's seen you. You can't just disappear." I took a slow sip of coffee, looking out at my peaceful garden. I'm taking some time for myself, Michael. What does that mean? What place? Listen, I've been going through some of Dad's old papers, and I think there might be other accounts he didn't mention in the will. We need to talk. My blood ran cold. He was looking. He was hunting. I'm not sure when I'll be back, I said, my voice surprisingly firm. I need this time. This is ridiculous, he snapped. First Dad leaves you practically nothing, now you're acting strange. What's going on? I almost laughed. Let him think I had nothing. Let him think I was a confused old woman who had wandered off. For now, being underestimated was my greatest strength. I'll be in touch when I'm ready, Jonathan, I said, and before he could argue, I ended the call. But as I hung up, a chilling thought crept in. How long would it be before his hunt led him right to my door? 2 months passed in a peaceful rhythm I hadn't known was possible. I met with Arthur Sterling, the lawyer and financial advisor Richard had entrusted with his secret estate. He was a kind, professional man in his late 60s who had worked with Richard for years to build my fortress of solitude. Together we went through the portfolio. The numbers were still staggering, but with Arthur's guidance, they began to feel real manageable. The income-producing properties in Chicago were well managed, providing a steady, substantial income that was automatically deposited into a new trust account in my name. Your husband was a brilliant man, Eleanor, Arthur remarked during one of our meetings in his Monterey office, not just in business but in his understanding of people. He structured this to be as hands-off for you as you wish. During that same meeting, he grew serious. There is one thing you should be aware of, he said, adjusting his glasses. We've received several inquiries from a Michael Vance. He's been persistent. My stomach tightened. What did he want? He's fishing, claiming to be conducting a review of his father's estate. He's asking about hidden accounts, shell corporations, anything that wasn't in the primary will. Of course, we've told him nothing, citing client confidentiality. But he's not giving up. He's been contacting every firm Richard ever worked with. I thanked Arthur for the warning. I knew my son. When Michael wanted something, he was like a dog with a bone. His suspicions were hardening into a full-blown investigation. The piece I had found in Lake Geneva suddenly felt fragile, like a thin pane of glass waiting to be shattered. The shattering came on a crisp autumn afternoon a few weeks later. I was in my garden, pruning the last of the roses when a sleek black SUV I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. The personalized license plate read, J. Vance. My heart plummeted into my shoes. Michael. He got out of the car, dressed in an expensive suit, his face a thunderous mask of accusation and triumph. He strode up the stone path, not waiting for an invitation. He stopped a few feet from me, arms crossed, looking from me to the charming cottage and back again. Found you, he said, his voice dripping with venom. I straightened up, my gardening shears feeling flimsy and useless in my hand. I kept my face a calm, neutral mask, betraying none of the chaos erupting inside me. Hello, Michael. This is a surprise. I'll bet it is, he sneered, his eyes raking over the cottage with a calculating glare. Care to explain this? 1 minute you're a penniless widow, the next you own a charming little getaway in one of the most expensive towns in the Midwest. When were you planning on mentioning it? I think you'd better come inside, I said, my voice low and even. No point in making a scene for the neighbors. He followed me into the living room, his critical gaze sweeping over every detail, every piece of furniture, every book on the shelves. I could practically see the dollar signs spinning in his eyes. Charming, he said, the word an insult. So this is where you've been hiding out, in your secret little vacation home. I haven't been hiding, Michael. I've been grieving. And planning. I set my purse down on a table and turned to face him squarely. How did you find me? A cruel, humorless smile touched his lips. I'm not an idiot, Mom. When you vanished, I did what any concerned son would do. I hired a private investigator. Told them I was worried about my elderly mother, who was showing signs of confusion after her husband's funeral. The cold, calculated manipulation of it hit me like a physical blow. He had painted me as senile, incompetent, to justify hunting me down. The investigator is very good, Michael continued, enjoying my stunned silence. Took him a few weeks, but he found the property records. Interesting reading. Seems Dad bought this place 4 years ago and kept it completely off his main books. Makes a person wonder what else he was hiding, doesn't it? He leaned against the doorframe, a predator cornering his prey. And that brings me to the garage. That worthless little garage. I paid it a visit yesterday, Mom. My blood ran cold. Door was locked up tight, he said, his eyes narrowing to slits. But the windows were dirty, not blacked out. If you get the angle just right, when the afternoon sun hits it, you can see inside. You can see the cars. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. So why don't you tell me, Mom? Why don't you tell me about the classic cars Dad hid from me? The cars that are worth 10 times more than the penthouse he supposedly left me. The air in the cozy living room crackled with tension. Michael stood before me, his face a mask of righteous fury, his accusations hanging between us like poison. He knew. Not everything, but enough. I moved to the kitchen, a small automatic action to buy myself a few seconds to think. I filled the kettle with water, my hands moving with a steadiness I didn't feel. Richard made his decisions for his own reasons, Michael. He followed me, blocking the doorway. A surprise, he repeated flatly, mocking my earlier words. Leaving his wife a secret cottage and a garage full of priceless cars while making his only son think he got the real inheritance? That's not a surprise, Mom. That's a betrayal. My hand stilled on the teapot. The garage was part of his legal estate, I said carefully. Yes, the mysterious garage. His voice hardened. I saw them, Mom. I saw enough to know what's in there. I have contacts. I made some calls. A 1959 Cadillac Eldorado? A 63 Stingray? Do you have any idea what those are worth? And that's just what I could see. Dad left me a penthouse with a mortgage and sky-high maintenance fees, and he left you a museum. So that was it. He had a partial truth, colored by his own sense of grievance. He saw the cars but knew nothing of the rest of it, the properties, the investments, the careful, loving plan behind it all. The penthouse and the portfolio he left you are substantial gifts by any measure, I said, turning to face him. Gifts? He scoffed. The portfolio barely covers my existing commitments. The penthouse needs hundreds of thousands in repairs I only found out about after I started demolition. Meanwhile, you're living here in your little fairy tale cottage, and sitting on a collection of classic cars. How is that fair? I poured the boiling water into the teapot, the familiar ritual, a small anchor in a stormy sea. What exactly do you want from me, Michael? The truth, he shot back. Were you in on this all along? Did you and Dad cook up this whole scheme to cut me out? No, I said, and the simple, honest words seemed to cut through his rage. I met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw not a week-old woman but something else. I knew nothing about the cottage or the garage until after Richard died. I was standing right where you are now, just as stunned, just as confused. This seemed to throw him off balance. Then why didn't you tell me? Why did you disappear? Because I needed time to understand it myself, I answered honestly. And frankly, Michael, your behavior after the will reading didn't exactly inspire trust. You threw me out of my home on my birthday. He flinched, a flicker of something, shame? Guilt? Crossing his face before the anger returned. I was upset. Finding out Dad had basically disinherited me in your favor. Disinherited you? My voice rose with disbelief. He left you a multi-million-dollar home and an investment account worth millions more. A fraction of what he had hidden away, he yelled. A fraction. I took a careful sip of tea, considering my next move. The moment had come, sooner than I expected. How much of Richard's painful, loving truth could my son bear to hear? There's a letter, I said finally. From your father. It explains everything. His posture stiffened instantly. A letter? You've had a letter this whole time and you didn't tell me. It was addressed to me, Michael, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And given how you treated me, I wasn't eager to share something so deeply personal. You called me useless. He looked away. People say things. Or, I interrupted, moments of stress simply reveal what's already there. What people truly believe. He gestured impatiently. The letter. Do you have it here? I went to the study and retrieved the copy I had made of Richard's letter. I kept the original tucked away safely. I returned to the kitchen and held it out to him. Before you read this, I said, I want you to understand. Your father loved you. Nothing he did was meant to hurt you. Let me be the judge of that, he snapped, snatching the pages from my hand. I watched him read. I saw the emotions play across his face like a storm. First, eager anticipation, then confusion, then disbelief. And finally, as he reached the part about his own character, his face darkened into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the pages. When he finished, he placed the letter on the table with a terrifying, deliberate calm. So, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. That's it. Dad thought I was a greedy, heartless monster. He thought I couldn't be trusted. He was concerned, Michael. He saw how your values had changed. And his solution was to deceive me? To set up this twisted test of character? To make me look like a fool, while he secretly made you one of the wealthiest women in Illinois. His voice was rising with every word. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? He shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He played me. And you went along with it. I did no such thing. Don't you dare defend him, he roared, his face turning red. He manipulated me, he judged me, and he left his entire legacy to you. Well, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. The 3 months following our confrontation were a miserable, silent war. As I had predicted, Michael immediately lawyered up. My attorney, Arthur Sterling, received a series of aggressive, threatening letters demanding a more equitable distribution of Richard's hidden assets. Arthur, calm and professional, responded each time by stating the simple, unshakable truth. Richard's estate had been planned meticulously and executed legally through sound trust structures. There was nothing to contest. After a few weeks of blustering, Michael's legal challenges fizzled out. His lawyers knew a losing battle when they saw one. His emails to me became less frequent, shifting from furious demands to cold, professional requests for certain family documents, with no mention of my health or well-being. I settled into a strange new life. A wealthy widow living quietly in a lakeside cottage, estranged from her only son. I divided my time between managing my new responsibilities and building a new community with Margaret and my other neighbors. I even took the 1963 Corvette for a drive along the lake. The roar of the engine a surprising thrill, a connection to a part of Richard I never knew. Then one brisk November morning, as I was raking leaves in the garden, a black town car pulled into my driveway. A woman in a sharp business suit got out, her expression tense and urgent. Mrs. Vance, she asked, extending a business card. I'm Diane Reeves, Jonathan's assistant. May I have a word with you? Something in her demeanor sent a chill down my spine. Is everything all right? Perhaps we could speak inside, she said, her eyes darting around nervously. In my living room, Diane perched on the edge of the sofa, declining my offer of tea. Mrs. Vance, I'm here because Michael has experienced some significant setbacks. I waited, my heart a heavy stone in my chest. He asked me to speak with you directly, she continued, clearly uncomfortable. He felt you might not take his call. What kind of setbacks? I asked, though a sick feeling told me I already knew. Financial, she said bluntly. She opened a slim portfolio. The renovation costs on the penthouse were nearly double the initial estimate. There were major structural issues, plumbing, electrical, that were discovered after demolition began. I nodded slowly. I remembered Richard mentioning the building's aging infrastructure years ago. Michael had dismissed his concerns as unnecessary worrying. Simultaneously, Diane went on, her voice strained. Michael's primary private investment failed. A large commercial development project he had leveraged heavily against. It fell through due to regulatory issues. Essentially, he's facing catastrophic losses with very little liquid capital to cover them. I kept my face impassive. Richard had warned me about Michael's high-risk strategies, his preference for flashy, dramatic gains over slow, steady growth. How does this concern me? I asked, my voice even. Diane met my gaze directly. To be blunt, Mrs. Vance, Michael is facing foreclosure on the penthouse. The renovation loans are secured against the property, and with the investment collapse, he can't make the payments. He's on the verge of bankruptcy. There it was. The inevitable conclusion. Not an apology. Not an attempt at reconciliation. A financial appeal, delivered by a surrogate to avoid the humiliation of asking himself, "Has he considered selling the penthouse?" I asked. "He has," she acknowledged. "But in its current state, mid-renovation gutted, it would sell at a massive loss. On top of that, there are liens from contractors he hasn't been able to pay. It's a mess." I thought of Richard's letter, his foresight that felt almost prophetic now. He had known this day might come. "I appreciate you explaining the situation, Diane," I said after a long moment. "Please tell Michael that I have received his request, and I will consider it." She looked startled. "Mrs. Vance, with all due respect, the situation is urgent. The bank could begin proceedings within weeks." "I understand," I replied, my tone firm but not unkind. "And I will need time to consider my response. That is all I can offer you today." After she left, I didn't sit and ponder. I got in my car and drove to Chicago. The doorman at the Penthouse looked shocked to see me, but he let me up. The moment the elevator doors opened onto the private foyer, I knew how bad it was. The elegant space was a disaster zone. The beautiful marble floors were covered in dust and debris. I pushed open the front door. The home Richard and I had shared was unrecognizable. It had been gutted to the studs. Exposed wires hung from the ceiling like dead vines. Piles of rubble and abandoned construction equipment littered the floors. Expensive fixtures were stacked in a corner, some of them cracked and damaged. A fine layer of dust covered everything, a sign that no work had been done here for weeks. As I picked my way through the wreckage of what had been my life, I heard the front door open behind me. "Mom!" It was Michael. He stood in the doorway, and the sight of him struck me. His expensive suit was rumpled. He looked gaunt, exhausted. The arrogant fury was gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of pure desperation. "Diane spoke to you," he said. "It wasn't a question." "She did," I confirmed, gesturing to the demolition around us. "I wanted to see it for myself." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of deep frustration I remembered from his childhood. "I overextended," he admitted, his voice rough. "The project, it was a sure thing. And then it wasn't. It all fell apart." I looked at the ruin of our home, the physical manifestation of his choices. "Why didn't you call me sooner, Michael? Before it got to this point?" He stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Pride, I guess. After our last conversation, after everything, I couldn't." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading hope. "So? Have you made your decision? Are you going to help me?" We stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of his ambition. The skeleton of the home we once shared was a stark, silent testament to his poor judgment. He looked at me, not as a son looks at a mother, but as a drowning man looks at a lifeboat. "I am willing to help, Michael," I said, and a wave of visible relief washed over his tense features. He started to speak, to thank me, but I held up a hand. "But not unconditionally. And not by simply writing a check to cover your debts. That would solve nothing." The relief on his face was replaced by wary confusion. What conditions?" "We'll need to discuss this properly," I replied, carefully stepping over a pile of discarded drywall. "Not here. Come to the cottage tomorrow. 11 o'clock. We will talk about a path forward. A path that addresses not just this immediate crisis, but the patterns that created it." He looked like he wanted to argue, to demand specifics, but he was in no position to make demands. He just nodded, a single defeated gesture. "Fine. Tomorrow." The next morning, he arrived at Lake Geneva precisely at 11. He had made an effort to look more put together, his suit freshly pressed, but the strain was still etched around his eyes. I didn't lead him into the formal living room. I led him out to the back patio, where I had set out iced tea and a light lunch. The setting was calm, neutral. Before he could even speak, I handed him a leather portfolio. "What's this?" he asked wearily. "These are financial projections and maintenance assessments for the penthouse," I explained as he opened it. "Your father commissioned them 3 years ago. He anticipated major systems failures in the building. The cost estimates in that report are almost identical to the overruns you've encountered." He scanned the pages, his frown deepening. He never told me about this. He tried to, I corrected gently. Several times. You dismissed his concerns as him being overly cautious. He even tried to show you these reports last Christmas. You called them boring building assessments and changed the subject. A flicker of pained recognition crossed his face. He set the portfolio down, his jaw tight. If you brought me here to say, I told you so on Dad's behalf. I haven't, I interrupted. I am establishing context. Robert saw this coming. Not just the building issues, Michael. The pattern. The pattern of choices that led you here. And what pattern is that? He asked, his voice defensive. Prioritizing appearance over substance, I said simply. Chasing risky, impressive gains instead of sustainable growth. The same pattern that led you to throw your mother out of her home, because her presence was inconvenient for your renovation plans. He had the grace to look down, a flush creeping up his neck. I shouldn't have done that. No, I agreed. You shouldn't have. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment before continuing. So, here are the conditions for my help. He looked up, bracing himself. First, complete and total transparency. I want to see everything. Every account, every debt, every contract. No more secrets. He nodded stiffly. Fine. Second, professional financial management. You have proven that your judgment is compromised. Any funds I provide will be placed into a structured trust with professional, independent oversight. You will work with them. His expression darkened. So I'll be on an allowance? Like a child. Like a man who has made serious financial miscalculations and needs guardrails while he rebuilds. I corrected. It's not punitive. It's protective. For both of us. He was quiet for a long time. The battle between his pride and his desperation warring on his face. What about the penthouse? He finally asked. The practical solution is to sell it, I said, watching him carefully. Complete the essential renovations to make it marketable and sell. It will cover a significant portion of your debts and allow you to start fresh. Sell it. The idea seemed to physically wound him. But it's the family home. It's where? It's a property, Michael. I interrupted gently. A property you were planning to gut and flip for a profit just a few months ago. Your memories aren't in those walls. He shot up from his chair and began pacing the small patio. You don't understand. Selling it would be admitting failure. Everyone would know. And there it was. The core of it all. Not sentiment. Image. They already know, Michael, I said quietly. Construction has been stopped for months. Contractors have filed liens. Your financial community, they talk. He stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping. He looked utterly defeated. I've really destroyed everything, haven't I? He whispered, the raw vulnerability in his voice startling me. Not everything, I said, my tone softening. But you are at a crossroads. So here is my final condition. You will get counseling. You will work with a therapist to understand the issues, the pride, the need for approval, the dismissal of others that led you to this point. And you will make amends. To me. His eyes snapped to mine. Amends. It means acknowledging the harm you caused, I said. It means understanding that relationships have consequences, just as financial decisions do. I am not just offering you a bailout, Michael. I'm offering you a chance to become the man your father always hoped you would be. He stared at me, then out at the lake, his mind clearly racing. I had laid out my terms. The choice was his. He could accept help with humility, or he could let his pride drag him into ruin. For 3 long silent days I heard nothing. I began to think his pride had won, that he would rather face bankruptcy and public humiliation than submit to my conditions. My heart ached at the thought. I wasn't trying to control him. I was trying to save him, not just his finances but his character. On the 4th morning my phone rang. It was him. Okay, he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. I'll do it. All of it. Tell me what I need to do. The journey that began with that phone call was harder and messier than either of us could have imagined. The first step was the financial audit. Michael Arthur Sterling and I spent a week in a conference room going over every document. The reality was even worse than I'd feared. He had hidden debts, made promises he couldn't keep, and leveraged his assets to the breaking point. Seeing the full picture laid bare was a deeply humiliating experience for him, but to his credit, he went through with it. He answered every question honestly, even when it made him look reckless and foolish. Next came the penthouse. We brought in a team of professionals who laid out two options: a long, expensive full renovation or a shorter, targeted one to fix the major issues and make the property presentable for a quick sale. Michael, for the first time, listened to expert advice instead of his own ego. We chose the latter. The trust one established paid the contractors and oversaw the project. It was a business transaction, clean and professional. The hardest part by far was the personal work. Michael began weekly sessions with a therapist I had found, a man who specialized in dealing with family business dynamics and issues of entitlement. The first few sessions, Michael told me later, were brutal. He was defensive, angry. But the therapist was skilled, and slowly, painstakingly, began to chip away at the armor Michael had built around himself. Our own relationship began to change, too. It was awkward at first. Our phone calls were stilted, focused only on the necessary logistics of the financial restructuring. But then, small things started to happen. During one call, after a long discussion about contractors, he paused. "How's the garden?" he asked. I was so surprised I didn't answer for a moment. It's lovely," I finally said. "The roses are still in bloom." "Dad always loved your roses," he said quietly, and then the call ended. It wasn't an apology, not yet. But it was a start. A crack in the wall he had built between us. A month later, he came to the cottage. He didn't call first, he just showed up. He looked tired but different. Calmer. He didn't come to talk about money. He came to help me rake the autumn leaves. We worked in silence for over an hour, the rhythmic scratching of the rakes the only sound between us. When we were done, sitting on the patio with cups of hot cider, he finally looked at me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I hadn't heard from him in years. "For what I said. For what I did. There's no excuse for it. I was a monster." Tears welled in my eyes. It was what I had been waiting to hear, not for my own vindication but for his. It meant he was finally seeing the truth. "You weren't a monster, Michael," I said softly. "You were just lost." That conversation was the turning point. He started visiting regularly, not out of obligation but because he seemed to genuinely want to. We talked about his therapy. He told me about the painful process of untangling his own self-worth from his net worth. He admitted that his marriage to Jessica was over. She had no interest in being married to a man who was no longer on the fast track to incredible wealth. He seemed more sad about the failure than heartbroken over the loss of her. The penthouse sold in the early spring. After all the debts and liens were paid, there was a modest amount left over, which was put directly into the trust under Arthur's management. Michael was officially debt-free, but he was also starting from scratch. One day he came to me with an idea. He had been offered a position, not a high-powered executive role, but a project manager position with a non-profit organization that built affordable housing in underserved Chicago neighborhoods. The salary was a fraction of what he used to make. "It feels right," he said, a strange, hesitant excitement in his eyes. "Using what I know about development for something good, not just for profit." I looked at my son, really looked at him. The hardness was gone from his eyes. The arrogant set of his jaw had softened. For the first time in a very long time, I saw the boy I had raised, the man his father had loved. He was finding his way back. Not just financially but morally. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time I had real hope. Spring returned to Lake Geneva, painting my garden in vibrant bursts of color. It had been nearly a year since Richard's death. A year that had felt like a lifetime. The man who visited me now was a stranger to the one who had thrown me out of my home. The changes in Michael were not just on the surface, they were deep, fundamental. His work with the affordable housing nonprofit consumed him in a way his old job never had. He spoke of building communities, not just flipping properties. He was quieter, more thoughtful, more present. On a bright Saturday in May, he drove up for his monthly visit. He was carrying a small, carefully wrapped package. "The garden looks amazing, Mom," he said, greeting me with a kiss on the cheek that was now familiar and warm. "Just working with what your father started." I replied, leading him to the patio. After we settled in with our coffee, he placed the package on the table. The final clean-out of the penthouse storage unit turned up a few more of Dad's things, he said. I thought you should have them. I unwrapped it. Inside was a small polished wooden box. I opened it. It was Richard's collection of cufflinks, the ones Michael had initially claimed for himself. I kept these thinking they were some kind of connection to him, Michael explained, watching my face. But I realized they're just things. The real connection isn't in possessions. My eyes filled with tears. This was a lesson he had learned the hard way. Beneath the cufflinks was a small velvet pouch. I opened it and my breath caught. It was my original wedding band. A simple thin gold ring I had thought was lost forever in the chaos of the renovation. I found it in Dad's study safe, Michael said softly. Along with this. He handed me a small envelope. My name was written in Richard's hand. Inside was a card. For our 45th anniversary. An anniversary he hadn't lived to see. The first band was a promise of the life we would build, he had written. This one celebrates the life we created. All my love, always. Tucked into the card was a jeweler's receipt. It was for a custom-made eternity band, dated just weeks before he died. An anniversary gift he never got to give me. He was planning ahead even then, I whispered. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The jeweler still had it, he said. I picked it up for you. He handed it to me. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen. A delicate band of sapphires, my birthstone, and diamonds. It was simple, elegant, and so perfectly me. The stones caught the spring sunlight, sending a rainbow of colors dancing across the table. I slipped it on my finger next to my original wedding band. They fit together perfectly. The plain gold of our beginning, and the brilliant gemstones of our long completed journey. Thank you, Michael, I said, my voice choked with emotion. This means more than I can say. We sat for another hour talking easily. He told me about a family he had helped move into a new home. I told him about my plans for the garden. As he got ready to leave, he paused at the garden gate. I've been meaning to ask, he said. Whatever happened to the cars? The ones in the garage? I smiled. I'm keeping the Cadillac, I said. It was our dream car. Your father would love knowing I take it for a drive along the lake on sunny days. The other two, I'm selling them. He nodded, expecting that. The proceeds, I continued, are being divided. Half will go to a new foundation I'm establishing to provide financial education and support for seniors who find themselves in difficult family situations. The other half will be placed in a trust for my future grandchildren, should you ever have any. He looked at me, a thoughtful, gentle expression on his face. Future grandchildren, he repeated softly. That's optimistic. Your father was always an optimist at heart, I replied. Beneath all his practical planning, he had a fundamental belief that people could grow, that they could become better versions of themselves. As I watched him drive away, I felt a sense of peace, of circles closing. Richard's strange, painful inheritance had achieved exactly what he'd hoped. It had given me security and independence. But more than that, it had been the catalyst that forced my son to confront the man he was becoming and choose a different path. That evening, I took the pink Cadillac for a drive. The powerful engine purred as I navigated the winding roads along the lake. The setting sun turned the water to molten gold. My hands, adorned with the plain band of my beginning and the jeweled circle of my completion, rested confidently on the wheel. You were right, Richard, I said aloud to his memory, my voice carried away on the gentle breeze. You were right about so many things. The worthless garage had unlocked not just a fortune, but a future I never expected. It had given me back my son. It had taught me my own strength. And it had proven that the truest inheritance isn't something you are given, but something you become. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's been a long and painful journey, but one that has taught me so much about love, loss, and the strength we find when we think all is lost. I'd love to hear from you now. Has there ever been a time in your life when a great challenge revealed an unexpected blessing? Let me know in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and subscribing for more. You never know whose story might give you the strength you need for your own.